Chapter 3 homework is determining the correct filing status. And I'll leave it up to you. Do you want to work on that alone and then come back and check in, or do we want to go through and work on these together?
I'm happy to do it together.
Okay. All right, Chapter 3 homework 1. And this is going to be in your book on page 76. Okay. So for some of these, they'll only have one filing status available, and some of them they'll have multiple, and if they do have multiple available, pick the most advantageous. So Alex and Morgan are a married couple who are living separately and are not legally divorced. Both have decided to live independently and manage their finances separately.
Married filing separately.
Yeah, they can file married filing separately.
But wouldn't the filing jointly
Yeah, they can
still give them more benefits than?
Yep, they can still file married filing jointly. So married filing jointly would be more beneficial, except that they'll get one refund for both of them. So they'll have to, if they want to keep their finances separate, they'd have to figure out how to split that up.
So they could do both, but
Yeah. I wonder what our authors had put for the answer there. Yeah, they said married filing separately. So I don't necessarily agree with that. Actually, I have a few clients that do keep all their finances separate, but they file jointly anyway, and they ask me to split up their refund according to, there's a formula the IRS uses if they need to split up a refund. So I'll use the same formula. Say this is how much your refund is, this is how much your share of the refund is. I can think of at least 3 couples right now that asked me for that additional service.
And that follows along with, I'm sorry.
That was all I would say. I just didn't know that was.
That follows along with getting them the best return that we can, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so number 2, Jessica is a single mother. She has a 7-year-old son, Lucas, who lives with her full time. She pays more than half the household expenses, including rent, utilities, and groceries.
She could have had a household, right?
Yep, head of household. Do you remember what the 3 requirements for head of household are?
You have to pay more than half the expenses.
Yeah, half the cost.
You have to have a qualifying child.
Yep.
6 months more.
Yep. Yep, you have to have a qualifying person, not necessarily a child, but a qualifying person who is related to you and lived with you for more than half the year.
Surviving spouse.
Right.
Okay.
Can we get them all?
That's 2 out of 3.
More than half the expenses. Qualifying person would be due for more than.
Unmarried, more than half, adult person, half the year.
Unmarried.
Yeah. So
That was it.
yeah, so it's unmarried or considered unmarried, and 2, half the cost of keeping up the home, and 3, qualifying person, related, and living with you. Okay, so the exception for number 3 for qualifying person, if your qualifying person is your parent, they don't have to live with you as long as you pay more than half the cost of keeping up their home. And for considered unmarried, that's a technical term, and I'll remind you that that means that your qualifying person is your son or daughter. So that might also be what you were thinking of. If you're married, you can still be considered unmarried for head of household purposes. If your qualifying person is your son or daughter, and your spouse did not live with you not even one day in the last 6 months of the tax year. Okay, so great. Number 2, the answer is head of household. Number 3, Lisa is a 38-year-old marketing consultant. She was legally separated from her spouse under a court decree on December 31st, 2023. So, tax year 2023, what is her filing status?
She would be able to file something. She could December 1st, or can she? And I think that's what would make it so she could, because you have to have it done by December. Is that right?
Yep. It's whatever your status is on the last day of the year is your tax status for the whole year. Okay. So she was divorced on December 31st. She is single for the entire year. So that is her filing status. Okay. Number 4, Robert is a 45-year-old teacher. Robert's spouse passed away in 2022, and he did not remarry before the end of 2023.
On this one, I guess, because I was thinking it had to be one for each one. Because I was looking at it and I was thinking, gosh, it could be, he could still file married filing jointly.
Well, if his spouse passed away in 2022,
Qualified surviving spouse.
does he meet all the requirements for qualified surviving spouse?
He didn't remarry. It's been, you have that, it has to be within the past 2 years. So if it's 2023, she had to pass away in 21 or 22.
So, okay, so spouse.
Oh, that's the one you have, wait, that has a child? Yep.
Yep.
That's the one you have to have a child, so he'd still be able to do married filing jointly because it's.
You can only file married filing jointly with your deceased spouse in the same year that they died. So if his spouse died in 2022, he's not going to be, right. So his filing status, the only thing he has is single. Because we're not going to assume any facts that aren't given in the question. So if he has no kids, he can't be surviving spouse. Okay, number 5, Robert is a single individual. His mother does not live with him, but he pays more than half of her living expenses, including the costs for a senior living facility.
And a household.
Yes, he'll qualify for head of household. As long as, so it's not given, but we can probably assume that. We might have to ask more questions. But for purposes of the homework, we can assume that. As long as his mother is also his dependent. Which we have, yeah, he pays more than half, so that's the support test. She's related.
Doesn't say anything about gross income.
Right, doesn't say anything about gross income. Yeah, so if I were writing this question, I would say that his mother has 0 gross income, or maybe just Social Security. Yeah, so we're not given whether she has gross income. So as long as his mother is his dependent, he gets to file head of household based on these facts. Okay, number 6, David pays the full cost of the home in which he and his 24-year-old daughter live. He is not a full-time student, or she is not a full-time student, or disabled. His daughter earns $4,000 and does not qualify as his dependent. His wife passed away in 2020.
Single.
Yep, single. Because he doesn't have.
Could he still claim his daughter like for a dependent for qualifying relative? Would she still be a qualifying relative?
It seems like she would, but the question is explicitly telling us that she's not his dependent. So, not sure exactly why, because it seems to me that she meets all the.
For qualifying. Yeah, because she earns only 4,000. And she lives with them full time.
Yeah, based on this, his daughter earns $4,000. I would believe that she is his dependent. If she is his dependent, he would be head of household.
Because he pays the full cost of the home.
Yeah, if we had changed this question so that she earns $5,000, then it would be clear because she would be over the gross income limit. Okay. Let's see, what did they say here?
Single.
Yeah, they said single. Okay, number 7, Shiloh is unmarried and lived all year with her boyfriend, Sweeney Todd, and Sweeney's 10-year-old son, Johnny. Sweeney does not know how to locate Johnny's mother. Sweeney was a bouncer and earned $5,000. He will file a return, but only to get his withholding back. Shiloh is a lawyer and provides over half the support of both Sweeney and Johnny, and more than half the cost of keeping up the home. Shiloh meets the test to claim Johnny as a qualified relative.
What?
I would not have given you this. I would have made you figure it out yourself. But Johnny is qualifying relative for Shiloh, not a qualifying child.
She can't really get anything for Sweeney Todd.
Right.
Because he makes 5,000. So really, she's going to be single with just a qualifying relative.
Right. Single with one dependent, Johnny. The reason Johnny qualifies as his dependent is because he's not a qualifying child of another taxpayer. Sweeney is not considered a taxpayer for this rule because the only reason he's filing a return is to get his withholding back. And his income is under the filing threshold. He's not required to file a return. So he's not a qualifying child of another taxpayer. Member of household or relationship test says that if they're not related to you, they must have lived with you the entire year, which is true. The support test says that you must provide more than half of the dependent support, which is true. And the gross income test, Johnny doesn't have any income, so he meets the gross income test. But Sweeney, who has $5,000 in income, does not meet it. So Johnny is a qualifying relative, but because they're not related, it does not qualify for her for head of household filing status.
So in a situation like that, is Sweeney claiming his son as his qualifying child, and she's claiming Johnny as a qualifying relative? Or is it only one person who claims?
Sweeney could claim Johnny as a qualifying child. If he does, then he becomes a taxpayer under the taxpayer rule.
Okay.
But he can elect not to. He can just file his tax return to get his $500 withholding back.
Okay.
All right. Number 8, Linda is divorced and has a 9-year-old daughter, Emily. Emily had lived with her for more than half of the year. Linda shares joint custody with her ex-spouse and pays more than half of the household expenses where she and Emily live.
So she can be head of household.
Yeah, head of household. Yep, your qualifying person has to live with you more than half of the year, and we have that right here. Instead, we'll just select the filing status. So here, Jane Smith maintains a household for herself and her daughter, Emily. She is not legally separated or divorced, but she has lived apart from her spouse all year. And she also signed a document permitting Emily's father to claim her as a dependent.
So you can file head of household.
She can still file head of household. Right. So this document that they're referring to is a Form 8332, and that only allows the non-custodial parent to list them as a dependent and claim the child tax credit. All the other benefits stay with the custodial parent. And so it's not going to let me check these boxes. But head of household will be marked. And then instead of Emily being listed in the dependent section, Emily's name will go here in this blank. Okay. Number 2, Sarah Wilson and her son Ethan reside at Peachtree Street. Sarah covers all the household expenses.
She's the household.
Yep, that one's pretty straightforward, just head of household. Okay. John Thompson and his wife Laura Thompson were residing at Maple Drive when John passed away in 2023. Laura continues to maintain the household where she and their dependent son Michael still live.
Should be the married filing jointly because he just passed away?
Yes. So you get one last year of married filing jointly. So John died during 2023, so he and Laura will still file a joint 2023 return.
And then then next year, Michael is still considered a child, then she qualifies for a spouse.
Right.
Okay.
So for the next 2 years, so 2024 and 2025, she'll be a qualifying surviving spouse. But then 2026 and beyond, if Michael's still her dependent, she'll probably revert back to head of household.
Or if not, then single.
Yeah.
Okay. Starting
Okay. Cole Easton and his wife Tina will not be filing a joint return. So what would Cole's filing status section look like?
filing separately.
Got married filing separately, and the way this would be filled in, we'd have Cole's name here, Cole's social security number here. The name for spouse would be blank, but spouse's social security number would still be filled in. And then the checkbox for married filing separately would be checked, and Tina's name would be written in here. Okay, Michael and Sarah Johnson are married, but in May, Michael moved out of the family home and will not file a joint return with Sarah. They have no children. In June of 2023, Sarah's father, Greg, moved into the home. Sarah pays over half of Greg's support and all the cost of keeping up the home.
Okay. So if he moved in June, that's 6. Oh wait. No, she couldn't, because for a qualified relative, they have to live all year, right?
No, for qualifying relative, they have to be related to you, or if not related to you, live with you the entire year.
So she could then. But they'd still have to file. No, they could. I'm lost because it could be
Okay.
household or married.
Okay. So Greg is going to be her dependent because he meets all the tests. Well, we haven't discussed his gross income, but assuming his gross income is below $4,700, then he would be her dependent because they're related. She supports him. His gross income is below $4,700. But they're still married.
Right. Says he's not going to file a joint return with Sarah, so that's married filing separately.
Yeah, so married filing separately is available, but we want to see if we can do better for head of household. And remember, the rule here is married or unmarried or considered unmarried. And this considered unmarried means your qualifying person is your son or daughter. And spouse did not live with you. So the considered unmarried test, she doesn't meet this, which means she's stuck with married filing separately. Because her dependent is not her son or daughter. Okay, the next one, Linda and Mark Thompson separated on September 24th, but were still married by the end of the year. They have no dependents. So it doesn't say legal separation, so we're not going to assume it's a legal separation. They just moved apart. They have no dependents. So what would their filing status be?
Married filing separately.
Married filing separately or married filing jointly. So we would recommend, of course, married filing jointly, but both spouses have to agree to that. So if they file married filing separately, we would again put Linda's first and last name here, Linda's social security number over here, Mark's social security number here, but not his name. Mark's name would go down here on this blank line, and the box for married filing separately would be checked.